Welcome to the Midrash Says Out Loud. This week we will be learning the Midrash Parasha. Tazria hope this channel will open your mind to the great teachings of the sages and deepen your connection to the Torah. Remember to like, share, and subscribe as we journey through the Midrash each week. Before we begin, we invite you to settle in for the drive or sit in your comfortable chair and relax as you listen to what the Midrash says out loud. The Almighty's numerous kindnesses to the unborn. Hashem prefaced the laws concerning a childbearing woman with the words Isha ki Tazria, if a woman conceived seed. This phrase brings to our notice his great kindness even to the unborn. The growth of the fetus in the mother's womb inspires a person with gratitude to the Creator for having miraculously provided for him even then. The Midrash employs its own poetic terms to describe that period. The angel in charge of conception is called Layla. When the Almighty wishes a human being to be born, he bids the angel Layla, "Bring me this and this neshama, soul, from Gan Eden." The neshama, though, resents begin uprooted from its divine source and complains to the Almighty, "I am pure and holy, linked to your glory. Why should I be degraded by having to enter a human body?" "It is not as you say," Hashem corrects it. "The world where you will live surpasses in beauty the one from whence you emanated. You were fashioned for the sole purpose of becoming part of a human being and being elevated by his deeds." The Almighty subsequently compels the soul to merge with the seed for which it was destined. Even before the fetus is formed, the angel inquires of Hashem, "What shall be its fate?" At that point, the entire future of the unborn child is preordained. The Almighty determines whether it is to be male or female, whether he or she shall be healthy or suffer from some sickness or handicap, his appearance, the degree of his intelligence, as well as all his mental and physical capabilities. Moreover, all particulars of his circumstances are already decided. Will he be wealthy or poor? What shall he possess? And who will be his future spouse? We see that all details of a person's life are predestined. However, there is one exception. Hashem does not decree whether someone will become a tzaddik or a rasha. Each one decides how to fashion himself by means of the faculties and capabilities that were preordained for him. The prophet exclaimed, "So says Hashem, let not the wise man pride himself on his wisdom, nor the mighty man on his might, nor the rich man on his riches. But let him who praises himself take pride in this, that he knows me, that I am Hashem, who exercises chesed, justice, and righteousness on earth. For in these things I delight, says Hashem." Yirmiyahu 9:22-23. A person should not feel pride in his intelligence, strength, or money, for these qualities are not of his own achievement. Rather, they were divinely decreed for him before birth. There is only one field of endeavor in which accomplishment results. From the individual's effort whether and to what extent he will study Hashem's greatness, by delving into his Torah and emulating his ways. To the degree in which he succeeds in this, he has actually accomplished something for himself. While still in the mother's womb, the child is taught the entire Torah. He is shown a vision of both Gan Eden and Gehinnom, and the angel in charge of him entreats him, "Become a tzaddik, do not become a rasha." When the child enters the world, the angel strikes. Kindness is to unborn his lips, causing all the Torah knowledge previously imparted to him to be forgotten. Nevertheless, that knowledge was absorbed by his subconscious mind, enabling him to retrieve it during his lifetime. We usually think of Kiryas Yam Suf, the splitting of the Red Sea, as an astounding miracle. In truth, the ability of a fetus to exist within the mother's womb is a miracle of no lesser proportions than the splitting of the Yam Suf. If not for Hashem's meticulous providence, the embryo could not survive. Our sages cite many examples, illustrating how wonderfully Hashem protects the unborn, among them the following. We all know that someone who is submerged even a short time inside a bathtub full of hot water suffers severe agony and emerges with injuries. The fetus, however, stays 9 months in the hot climate of the mother's uterus and thrives due to Hashem's special providence. A woman who carries a child resembles an upright container whose opening is at the bottom. Only due to Hashem's kindness, is the fetus is held in place and does not slip out. If a person eats several different foods in succession, each displaces the other in the stomach, pushing it further down. It is due to Hashem's special design that no matter how much the expectant mother eats or drinks, she does not dislocate the fetus. Hashem, in his kindness, provided that all nourishment which the mother ingests is automatically transferred through the placenta to sustain the growing embryo. It is a miracle that the fetus does not excrete its wastes. If it would, the mother's stomach would burst and she would die. At birth, the baby is not propelled out of the womb suddenly, which could cause injury. Rather, Hashem gradually dilates the cervix of the womb like someone who carefully and slowly unlocks a prison door to dismiss a prisoner who was held captive for a long period, thereby ensuring that his transition to freedom will be smooth. While the Almighty appointed an angel in charge of pregnancies, he himself directly supervises childbirth. Were not the keys to three matters, which are vital to mankind, entrusted to an angel, but rest in the hands of the Almighty himself. 1. Childbirth. 2. Rain. In this context, rain also refers to Parnassa, since when most Jews were occupied with farming, the quality of the crops and hence their livelihood was dependent upon rain. 3. Tekiyat Hamaitim, the resurrection of the dead. The Almighty personally directs these actions in accordance with our merits and tefillot. At the moment when the child enters the world, Hashem adjusts all his physical functions to meet the new environment. Bodily openings which were previously closed open at birth, and passages which were open in the fetus are now blocked. As soon as the newborn enters the world, he finds a new source of nourishment miraculously prepared for him, the mother's milk. While young animals suckle from the udders, Hashem prepared the milk for the human baby in the upper part of the mother's body, close to her head. The Almighty, in his kindness, thus paid tribute to the Kedusha and dignity of mankind. A look at the newborn leads to the reflection that Hashem is an inimitable artisan. Out of a single drop, he accurately shaped the millions of details of which the human body is composed. How many plans and drafts are designed, discarded, redesigned, and again improved by a human artist before he presents a perfect work of art. Hashem endowed the newborn with life, an inimitable feat. For no Tazria childbearing woman, human artist, or engineer, however brilliant and experienced, can create a being that lives and breathes. Hashem implanted in the newborn the potential to reproduce his kind. A human sculptor creating the most awe-inspiring statue can never make one which can reproduce another artwork. Contemplating these miracles, Channa, after the birth of her son Shemuel, praised Hashem, exclaiming, "There is no rock like our God." Samuel 2:20. These words are interpreted by our sages as, "There is no sculptor like our God." Besides God, no one is capable of creating an infant. Although a child is born soiled and besmeared with blood and continues to dirty himself, he is nevertheless liked by everyone. The charm of babies and young children, explain our sages, is that of the Shechina which rests upon them, since they are free of sin. As soon as the Yetzer Hara begins to take possession of a child's heart, the difference is noticeable, and even his parents become incensed at him. Originally, childbirth took place immediately after conception and was painless. The present situation is a result of the curse pronounced upon Chava after she sinned. In the future, the curse of 9 months pregnancy will once again be lifted, and delivery of children will immediately follow conception and be painless. As Yeshayahu prophesied, 66:7, "Before she will travail, she will bring forth, before her pain will come, she will give birth to a male child." The laws of the childbearing woman. In the previous Parsha, Shemini, the Tumah, ritual impurity, created by animal carcasses, is discussed. Now, the Torah proceeds to explain the various laws concerning Tumah which can emanate from the human body. Those pertaining to the childbearing woman, the Nida, the Zava, the Metzora, leper, the Baal Keri, and the Zav. Bas. Why does the Torah treat these laws only after those of impurity caused by animals? The sequence, it seems, should be the reverse. The laws of impurities of man should be discussed before those of the beasts. This order, however, follows the pattern of creation. Just as Adam came into being only after the animals, so were the halakos pertaining to him enumerated after those of the animals. Man was created last, among other reasons, for the sake of humbling him. Should he think overly much of himself, he is reminded, the animals were already in existence before you. In the same vein, the laws concerning man are postponed, following those of the animals to imply, do you know who and what you are if you fail to keep the Almighty's laws? Nothing but another species of animal, one which belongs at the end of the list of them all. The laws of Parasha's Tazria, which describe the various impurities in a person's body, should paint to a person a realistic picture of who he is. He should consider that he originated from a putrid drop of semen and, already at birth, caused his mother to become impure. In death, his body decays and his metame defiles others. Moreover, the tuma created by man is more severe than that of animals. Animals cannot defile on contact when they are alive, whereas an unclean person defiles even during his lifetime. Animal carcasses cause only tuma, impurity, which lasts 1 day, whereas a human being defiles for 7 days. How then does a human being have the audacity to arrogantly disregard his Creator's wishes? Hashem ordained that a woman become tamaya, ritually unclean, after childbirth. If she gave birth to a male child, she is unclean for 7 days. If to a female child, for 14. Childbearing woman, 115. Even if the woman's tuma period ended and she immersed herself in the mikvah, becoming pure for her husband, in the time of the Beit HaMikdash she continued to be tamai, with regard to all matters concerning the Beit HaMikdash. She could not enter there, eat korbanos, or eat teruma for 40 days after the birth of a boy, and 80 days after the birth of a girl. After that period, she was purified by offering the sacrifice of the childbearing woman, termed korban yoledes. It consisted of a turtle dove or a pigeon offered as a chatat sacrifice and a lamb as an olah. If she was financially incapable of bringing a lamb, she brought a pigeon or a turtle dove instead. Blow to spaba. Why should the Torah obligate a woman to bring an offering after having given birth, and not only an olah, burnt offering, but a chatat, sin offering, which indicates some type of guilt on her part? The purpose of the olah offering is to express gratitude to the Almighty, who delivered the woman safely from the dangers of childbirth. Having to come to the Beit HaMikdash to offer it evokes in her recognition of the Almighty's great kindness to her. In addition, she is required to offer a chatat to atone for her guilt in having transgressed her vow. When a woman is in the throes of death during delivery, tormented by pain, she vows that she will never again live with her husband. Once the child is born, she regrets her vow and transgresses it. She therefore needs a chatat as an atonement. According to another explanation, her chatat is not offered to make amends for her personal sin, but for that of our first mother Chava, who through her wrongdoing degraded all future generations. If not for Chava's sin, the Yetzer Hara would not have entered the human heart, but mankind would have continued to exist in total purity and holiness. Human propagation would then have taken place as a purely holy act, unaccompanied by any earthly desires. The childbearing woman's olah sacrifice serves to atone for any wrong thoughts, and the chatat for transgressions indeed, both of which came about as a result of Chava's sin. The mitzvah of Brit Milah, circumcision. In conjunction with the laws of the childbearing woman, the Torah mentions that a Brit Milah must be performed on a male child when he is 8 days old. This mitzvah was mentioned for the first time in Parasha's Lech Lecha, when Hashem commanded Abraham to perform Brit Milah on himself. He added that henceforth, all male offspring would have to be circumcised on the 8th day after birth. Why may a Brit Milah not be performed earlier than the 8th day? Our sages give several reasons, among them. 1. Hashem commanded that we wait until the day when he knows the child possesses sufficient strength to endure the operation. 2. A child's circumcision is considered similar to a sacrifice since the child is thereby brought under the wings of the Shekhinah. It is therefore required that the baby live through at least one Shabbat in order to be sanctified and elevated by its Kedusha. The infant is then fit to be a korban for Hashem. In a similar vein, animals are not acceptable as sacrifices before the age of 8 days. Brit Milah, 117. On the occasion of his friend's visit, the king arranged a grand banquet. Of welcome, as they were about to sit down to eat, the king commented, "It is not proper to begin the meal before you have met the queen. You do not truly know anything about this palace before having paid a visit to the queen, for she is comely beyond description." Similarly, the Almighty ruled, unless a child has been face to face with Queen Shabbat and absorbed its sanctity, he is not yet ready to undergo a Brit. It is customary to reserve a special chair for the angel of the covenant, the prophet Eliyahu, who appears at every Brit Milah. He is required to be present because he once spoke disparagingly of Bnai Yisrael. The prophet Eliyahu was a great zealot for Hashem's honor. He accusingly said to the Almighty, "The Bnai Yisrael have forsaken your covenant," Melachim 19:10. He was referring to the covenant of Milah, which was neglected by the Jews since the wicked king Achav had forbidden the performance of circumcisions. Although Eliyahu's words were spoken for the sake of Hashem's glory, the Almighty disapproved of the accusation against his people. He bade Eliyahu to anoint Elisha as a prophet in his stead, and moreover, commanded him to reappear at every Brit Milah to bear witness to the fulfillment of the mitzvah by the Jews. The Roman Emperor Turnus Rufus questioned Rabbi Akiva, "Whose handiwork is superior, God's or man's?" "Man's," replied Rabbi Akiva. "Your answer surprised me," remarked Turnus Rufus. "Do you mean to imply that a human being can create anything which resembles heaven and earth?" "I did not refer to creations which are beyond man's abilities," Rabbi Akiva replied, "but rather to those which are within his realm. Why do you Jews circumcise yourselves?" Turnus Rufus asked further, "Don't you thereby presume that the Creator's work requires improvement?" "This was precisely the question I had anticipated," Rabbi Akiva retorted, "and I therefore asserted that human accomplishments superior to the Creator's are. If this is your opinion, prove it," demanded Turnus Rufus. Rabbi Akiva returned home and instructed his wife, "Bake me a nice loaf of bread from oil, flour, and spices." Gimea, returning to the emperor, he held out the bread in one hand and some wheat kernels in the other. "Now tell me, O king, which of the two is superior, the grain or the bread?" he demanded. "The bread, of course," answered Turnus Rufus. "You see," countered Rabbi Akiva, "you yourself confessed that the work of man is greater than the Creator's. When he fashioned the universe, he left it for man to perfect. Grain must be cut and baked in order to become bread, and vegetables must be cooked and spiced. Thus, by performing Milah on a child, we perfect the Creator's work. If Hashem intended a boy to be circumcised, he could have created him that way," insisted Turnus Rufus. "Why should you make that assertion only regarding circumcision?" retorted Rabbi Akiva. "You might just as well ask why Hashem left the umbilical cord attached to the newborn, leaving it for man to sever." Although Rabbi Akiva concluded the discussion with this remark, our sages revealed to us the true reason for a child's coming into the world uncircumcised. Hashem fashioned the child imperfect in order to grant us the merit of performing his mitzvos, whose fulfillment purifies and elevates us. On the day of the great and final judgment, Avraham Avinu will be stationed at the entrance to Gehinnom to examine all the Jews. If anyone possessing a Brit Milah is brought there, Avraham will not permit that he be cast into Gehinnom. Tazria Tzara'at. What, though, will happen to those hardened sinners who had a Brit Milah, but wantonly excluded themselves from the midst of the community of Israel by violating the Torah? Abraham will remove the foreskins of infants who passed away before the age of 8 days and attach them to those Rishaim, and thereafter Gehinnom will consume them. Even this Midrash points out the awesome merit of Brit Milah. It teaches that if a Jew should be devoid of Torah knowledge and mitzvos, his Milah alone possesses the power of protecting him from the severe punishment of Gehinnom. Brit Milah is the seal that stamps a Jew as a servant of Hashem and a member of the community of Israel. Being part of the community of Israel, he is granted the benefits of the merits of the community. King Shlomo taught the esoteric verse, Koheles 11:2. Tain Chilek Lashiva Vegam Lishmona, give a portion to the 7 and also to the 8. Among the many meanings of this pasuk, one relates to our topic. By the 7, Shlomo referred to the nidus period of a woman, by the 8, to the days of Brit Milah. The verse teaches us that Hashem says to the Jewish people, "Be meticulous in observing the laws of the niddah, and I will then bless you with a male child upon whom you will be able to perform Brit Milah." The definition of Tzara'at, the divine plague of leprosy. It is incorrectly assumed that the Tzara'at described in the Torah is identical with the common disease known as leprosy, and that the Torah prescribes how to check the spread of the infection. This theory, however, is based on mistaken premises. The symptoms of the Tzara'at described by the Torah are not those of leprosy. Neither does Tazria. An example of Tzara'at occurring as a result of idolatry was the case of the sin of the golden calf. Its worshippers were immediately divinely stricken with leprosy, immorality. The sin of immorality is severe not only because of the evil inherent in the act itself, but also on account of the results it may engender, the birth of a mamzer, which is a tragedy that cannot be rectified. When Abraham and his household traveled to Egypt, Pharaoh kidnapped Sarah. He had her taken to his palace for immoral purposes, and therefore Hashem sent the plague of Tzaras upon him and upon those at the Egyptian court. Bereshis 12:17. Of the 24 existing types of Tzara'at, Pharaoh was stricken with the worst one. Murder. Although a murderer may be pardoned by heaven, his regret and teshuvah will not bring about the revival of the slain victim. In order to find atonement for this irreparable crime, therefore, the murderer may be afflicted with the sufferings of Tzara'at. After King Shaul's death, his general Avner crowned Shaul's son Ishbosheth. David was recognized as a king only by the members of Yehuda, his own tribe, and had at his command a small arms with his faithful general Yoav at their head. For the next 2 years, feuds raged between Ishbosheth's and David's followers, and eventually David's following gained in strength. Then a quarrel broke out between the official king, Ishbosheth, and his general, Avner. Avner threatened that he would henceforth support David. He sent secret messengers to David promising him that he would assemble the entire nation to crown him. When Avner and 20 men came to visit David in Chevron, he received them kindly, made them a feast, and sent them away in peace. Sins causing Tzara'at, David's general Yoav had not been present at the meeting, and only later heard that Avner had been honored by David and dismissed peace fully. He reproached David, saying, "Don't you know that Avner came to spy on you? He means to deceive you." Yoav decided to destroy Avner since he considered him a dangerous opponent. Without David's knowledge, he sent a message to him, calling him back to Chevron. The unsuspecting Avner returned, and Yoav slew him. When David learned of Yoav's treacherous deed, he was grieved. He condemned the murder and proclaimed a public fast day. For the slain General Avner had been a Talmid Chacham, and his death was tragic for the entire community. Although kings usually do not escort a bier, David accompanied Avner's coffin so as to demonstrate that he had had no hand in his death. David cursed Yoav and his descendants with 5 curses, among them, "Let the house of Yoav never lack those who are afflicted with Tzara'at." This curse was the deserved punishment for Yoav's sin, since Tzara'at is the heavenly retribution for bloodshed. Chilul Hashem, desecration of the name of heaven. This transgression invites a drastic form of punishment, since mankind exists only in order to sanctify God's name. If we act in the opposite manner, we contradict the purpose of our very existence and do not deserve to live any longer. Tzara'at, a punishment considered as terrible as death itself, therefore befalls one who desecrated the name of heaven, blaspheming the Almighty. During King Shaul's reign, the Jews were attacked by the Pelishtim. The Philistine champion, the mighty ironclad giant Goliath, appeared on the battlefield morning and evening, challenging the Jews. "Choose a man Tazria from among you to conduct a duel with me. If he wins, all the Pelishtim will be your slaves. Should I win, however, you Jews will be our slaves." In Goliath's mocking words, another allusion was implicit, which was well noted by the Jews. When he exclaimed, "Choose a man," he referred to the Almighty himself, who is termed a man of war, Shemot 15:3, implying derisively, "I am battling your God too." The young David had come to the battlefield to inquire about his brother's welfare. He arrived precisely at the time when the giant was shouting his daily threats towards the Jewish army. On beholding the armed giant and hearing his blasphemous words, King Shaul trembled, and so did the entire Jewish army. The young David, however, was seized with holy indignation at the giant's contemptuous demeanor. Although inexperienced in battle, he proposed to King Shaul that he would contest the giant, so as to remove the tremendous Chilul Hashem which resulted from the situation. When David and the giant stood face to face, the duel's outcome seemed clear beyond doubt. On one side there was the untrained shepherd boy without armor or shield, holding in his hand a sling and 5 smooth stones. On the other, the giant, whose towering height was nothing less than 6 amos and his ears about 12 feet, swinging a spear that resembled a weaver's beam with his shield-bearer marching in front of him. The giant taunted the approaching shepherd boy, but David retorted, "I come in the name of Hashem, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you blasphemed. May Hashem strike you today with tzara'at, so that you will be weakened and fall into my hands. Then all the nations will acknowledge the Almighty's existence and the community of Israel, his special providence. They will clearly realize that a battle is won neither by sword nor by spear, but depends upon Hashem alone." David's tefillah was instantly answered. Tzara'at broke out on Goliath's body as a just punishment for his having caused a Chilul Hashem, and his strength rapidly diminished. David flung a stone at him which penetrated the giant's forehead, causing him to fall to the ground. David ran forward, drew the giant's sword from its sheath, and severed his head. Sins causing tzara'at. When the Pelishtim saw their hero dead, they fled, and the Jews pursued them, robbing the public, for example, deceptively overcharging one's customers for wares which he sells. This crime is punishable by tzara'at because it is almost impossible to make amends for it, since the thief does not know to whom to make restitution. Acting in a capacity not permitted to him, King Uzziyahu, who reigned over the kingdom of Yehuda, was right teos as long as his teacher Zechariah was alive. However, after his Rebbe passed away, he neglected his Torah studies and occupied himself with farming with passionate devotion. The result was that he erred in an important matter. He desired to burn ketores, incense, in the Beit HaMikdash, thinking that Hashem's glory would be magnified by having the king personally offer it. In fact, though, a non-Kohen is not permitted to perform a service. As he entered the sanctuary for this purpose, the Kohen Azariah, along with 80 strong Kohanim, rose in protest. "It is not for you, Uzziyahu, to offer incense to Hashem," they reproved him. "Only a Kohen who is a descendant of a Haran and who is consecrated is permitted to do so. Leave this place, for you are overstepping your boundary." King Uzziyahu became angry and was about to proceed despite this rebuke. Suddenly, his forehead broke out in the white spots characteristic of the dreaded disease of tzara'at. This was an overt divine punishment, and Uzziyahu acknowledged the Almighty's hand. He left the Beit HaMikdash and lived secluded from the city. Since his tzara'at never healed, he remained isolated until the day of his death and was not interred in the tombs of the kings. This incident serves to illustrate that one who trespasses on another's domain incurs the tzara'at punishment. Conceit. In the view of our sages, the vice of conceit ranks equal with idol worship. The two may be put in a common category, for they stem from a common faulty attitude: the transgressor's presumption that the Almighty's glory does not fill the world. Lashon Hara. The sin of Lashon Hara used to bring about tzara'at in its most extreme form. As will be explained in Parshas Metzora, one who speaks Lashon Hara denies basic Torah concepts. An example of someone smitten with leprosy for speaking Lashon Hara was Moshe's sister Miriam. She stated concerning her brother Moshe, "Does Hashem speak only to Moshe? Has he not spoken to us too?" Bamidbar 12:2. Her words were not prompted by malice. She mistakenly assumed that Moshe's level of prophecy was similar to that of other prophets, and therefore, in her opinion, he was not justified in separating from his wife. Rather, he was obligated to continue living with her and begetting children just as she and Aharon lived with their respective spouses, despite their being prophets. Nevertheless, her words were considered lashon hara, and tzara as immediately befell her. An evil eye, that is, acting miserly and begrudging in the miser's house, tzara'at breaks out as a direct midah keneged, midah retribution. When he was asked to lend his possessions to others, he pretended not to possess the requested object. Tzara'at, therefore, struck the walls of his house, whereupon all his possessions had to be cleared out. They were then seen by all. A man requested of his neighbor, "Could you please lend me a pound of wheat?" Sins causing tzara'at. "Have no wheat," replied the other gruffly. "Or barley then," said the neighbor. "Have none," repeated the miser. "Maybe you can give me a few dates," persisted the neighbor. "Sorry, I don't have any," the miser insisted, closing his door. One woman asked another, "May I borrow your mop stick?" "I don't have one," replied the other. What used to happen to this type of stingy people in the time of the Beit HaMikdash? Their houses would be stricken with the symptoms of leprosy, and the Kohen summoned for an inspection ruled that all belongings had to be cleared out. They were put out into the street, in full view of everyone. Didn't he claim he had nothing? "In the house," said the neighbors upon seeing the barley, wheat, and dates. Why, he invoked the curse of tzara'at against himself by feigning that he was without means, while instead he was really blessed. Yes. Refusal to loan or give away of one's possessions to others calls for the extreme punishment of tzara'at, since Hashem created people to perform chesed with one another. So far we quoted 10 vices which engendered tzara'at, and these are listed in the Midrash. The Gemara, Erchin 15, adds another sin punishable by tzara'at: taking a false oath. An example of someone stricken with leprosy for that transgression was Gehazi, the servant of the prophet Elisha. This came about as follows. A high-ranking official and general of the king of Aram, Naaman, was taken ill with leprosy. A little Jewish girl served in Naaman's household. She had once been captured when Naaman had ordered his troops to raid Eretz Yisrael, and she advised his wife, if only Naaman could visit the prophet in Shomron, he would heal him of the disease. The wife reported her words to Naaman, who repeated them to the king of Aram. The king gave his consent for Naaman to undertake a journey to Eretz Yisrael in order to be cured, and wrote the following message to Jehoram, king of Yisrael. I have sent my servant Naaman to you, that you should heal him. The king of Aram assumed that the Jewish king certainly was on friendly terms with the prophet and, on reading his message, would command the prophet to heal Naaman. However, when Naaman arrived with his message, Achav rent his garments in despair. Achav was a Rasha who had no contact with the prophet Elisha and would not seek the prophet's assistance. Achav believed that the letter was a mere pretext, a demand for the impossible, which would supply the Aramite king with an excuse to attack the Jewish army. Am I God who can kill or resurrect that the king sends me a man to cure him of his sickness? Exclaimed Achav. He only seeks a quarrel with me. Elisha heard word of Achav's reply to the letter and sent him a message saying, Why have you rent your clothes? Let Naaman come to me, and he shall know that there is a prophet in the community of Israel. Elisha's words signified that he would perform the great miracle of healing the sick for the sake of demonstrating the presence of the Almighty in the midst of the Jewish people. Naaman traveled to Elisha's house, and Elisha sent a messenger to the door, who commanded Naaman in his name, Go to the Jordan River and immerse yourself therein 7 times, then your flesh will again be clean. A Tazria, Naaman healed. Upon hearing this order, Naaman turned around and left the house in rage. The prophet didn't even come out to see me, he exclaimed disappointedly. I thought he would look at me, utter some words in his God's name, wave his hand, and thereby heal me. In what way is the Jordan River superior to the rivers of Damascus, Avana and Parpar? Washing myself in the Jordan will not rid me of my leprosy any more than would washing myself in these? His servants, however, begged him to listen to Elisha. "We are certain that his words contain some great secret," they said. "Why not try his advice?" Naaman finally consented, traveled to the Jordan, and immersed himself 7 times. After the 7th time, the leprosy disappeared, and his flesh became as pure as that of a little child. This was indeed a great miracle, for the terrible disease of leprosy is equivalent to death itself, and one who was healed from it felt as if he were resurrected from the dead. Naaman hurried back to Elisha and proclaimed, "Now I know that there are no gods on earth except for the God of Israel. Please accept a gift from me." Naaman had brought from Aram a treasure, 10 kikros of silver, 6,000 gold pieces, and 10 changes of clothing. "I swear that I will not accept anything from you," replied Elisha. Naaman pressed him, but Elisha persisted in his refusal. He wished everyone to realize that this was a wonder wrought by the Almighty himself, and not a feat of the prophet for which he deserved remuneration. Naaman promised that he would henceforth acknowledge Hashem as the true God and sacrifice to him. He loaded his donkeys with earth from Eretz Yisrael to build an altar for the Almighty in his hometown. "Please pray to Hashem," he requested of Elisha, "that he forgive me for officially having to bow to the idol in Beit Rimmon, for I'm afraid of the king of Aram." Naaman became a Ger Toshav, a Gentile who accepted upon himself the 7 Noachide laws. Elisha had a servant by the name of Gehazi, who, though a learned man, was of vile character. He greedily thought of all the gifts his master had declined and contrived a plan to retrieve them. He rode after Naaman, who, when he saw him, descended from the chariot to meet him and asked, "Is all well?" "Sabristo." "All is well," replied Gehazi. "My master has sent me with the message. 2 students of the prophet have just arrived from Har Ephraim. Please give them a kikar of silver and 2 changes of clothing." Naaman was suspicious and demanded, "Swear that your master actually sent you." Gehazi then took a false oath. He thereby became deserving of the Tzaraat punishment with which Elisha cursed him later. Naaman, after the oath, then believed his words and urged him to accept not only 1 kikar of silver but 2, commanding 2 of his servants to carry the treasure to Gehazi's home. Gehazi deposited the silver and clothing in a secret place at the entrance of the city and dismissed them. Then he returned to Elisha, who at that time was in the Beit Hamidrash, teaching his student Tazria. Naaman healed dents the Parasha of the 8 shiratzim unclean insects. Vayikra 11:29-30. "Where do you come from, Gehazi?" Elisha inquired. "From no special place," answered Gehazi evasively. Elisha, though, knew the truth. "Although I was here physically, my heart was there when the man descended from the carriage and gave you the money," he rebuked him. He was very angry. He had sworn in Hashem's name that he would not accept anything, and now Gehazi had transgressed the oath, causing a chilul Hashem. Furthermore, the effect of the miracle would be lost on people. Rather than acknowledging that Naaman was cured by a supernatural occurrence showing Hashem's might, they would consider Elisha a skilled physician who, having effected a cure, accepted a fee for his services. Elisha thundered, "I told you not to accept anything. Do you wish to receive the reward for your Torah learning by being recompensed with beautiful gifts in this world? Well, if you think you need any of Naaman's belongings, I will let you have them. Take his leprosy. You and your sons shall never be healed from it." As Gehazi left Elisha, the symptoms of Tzaraat broke out on his body. He was covered with spots as white as snow, and his 3 sons were stricken too. The sons too were guilty since they knew about the crime and did not protest. The 4 lepers mentioned later as having been stationed outside the gate, Melachim 7:3, were Gehazi and his 3 sons. 57. The above story, which is found in the Seger Melachim, chapter 5, is read as the Haftarah of this Parsha. The principal halakos of the leper's symptoms of impurity. Tzaraat of the skin. If a Jew in the time of the Beit Hamikdash discovered on his skin 1 or more spots ranging in color from a bright snow white to a darker shade resembling egg white, he had to submit himself to examination by a Kohen. The Kohanim were experts in examining Tzaraat. However, if the Kohen was an Am Haaretz, ignoramus, he consulted a Talmid Chacham and based his verdict on the Torah scholar's findings. The Kohen declared a person tamai, impure, if he found one of the three following symptoms. 1. White hair. If the Kohen saw 2 white hairs in the diseased area, he declared the person definitely tamei and subjected him to the laws of isolation, which will be explained in the following chapter. 2. A spot of raw flesh. If a part of the skin within the diseased area contained raw flesh, the stricken person was declared immediately tamei. 3. Spreading. If the stricken person's skin showed neither 2 white hairs nor raw flesh in the white spots, the Kohen placed him in quarantine in a secluded house for 7 days. After these 7 days, he re-inspected him. If the diseased area had expanded beyond its previous size, or if one of the 2 above-mentioned signs, white hair or raw flesh, appeared, he was declared tamei and isolated. If none of the above signs of impurity was apparent, the Kohen placed him in quarantine for another 7 days. Thereafter, he re-examined him to see if any of the 3 above-mentioned signs were present. If one of them had developed, he was declared a definite leper and isolated. If none of these signs, white hair, raw flesh, or spreading of the disease, were visible to the Kohen, the individual underwent the complete purification process of the leper, including offering sacrifices, which will be explained in Parasha's Metzora, and then was pure. There are 2 symptoms which rendered a person tahor, pure, whenever he was examined. If one of these ever appeared, his quarantine or isolation was terminated. They were: 1. If after a period of seclusion the tzaraat had spread over the entire body from head to heel, leaving no raw flesh at all. 2. If, during any examination, the Kohen determined that the white color of the tzaraat had assumed a shade darker than egg white. Leprosy in a healing wound. If someone was injured and the healing wound showed the appearance of white spots of leprosy, he had to go to the Kohen for examination. The Kohen declared him tamai if 2 white hairs appeared in the affected area. If he did not discern 2 white hairs, he quarantined the leper for a week and re-examined him. If after that time the white area was enlarged, or if 2 white hairs appeared in it, he was declared tamei. If not, he was tahor and did not have to be quarantined for an additional week. Leprosy in a burn. If, in a person's healing burn, white spots of leprosy appeared, he had to be examined by a Kohen. The halakos applying to a burn are the same as those applying to a healing wound. Leprosy in a bald spot. If a person had a bald spot on his head or beard and white spots appeared in it, he was required to go to a Kohen for examination. The Kohen immediately declared him tamei if he noticed 2 short gold-colored hairs within the area of the white patch. If there were no 2 such hairs, he was quarantined for a week. If at the end of that week one of the following 2 symptoms had developed, he was declared tamei. 1. Appearance of 2 yellow hairs in the bald area. 2. Spreading of the white spots. If neither was present, he was quarantined for a second week and searched for those same symptoms. If they were absent, he was pure. Leprosy in the bald back area of the head. If a man turned completely bald from the middle of his head until the back of his neck and white spots appeared in that area, he had to be examined by a Kohen. The Kohen declared him tamei if he noticed one of 2 symptoms. 1. Spreading of the white spots. 2. Raw flesh appearing in the diseased area. The laws of the 1 or 2 week seclusion, as with the above-mentioned types of tzaraat, applied here also. Leprosy in the bald front area of the head. If a man's hair fell out, rendering him completely bald from the middle of his head to his forehead, and white spots appeared in that area, they required examination. The halakos applying as those which apply to Karacha's baldness in the back area of the head are the same Tazria isolation laws. A stricken person was required to go to a Kohen for more than a physical examination. The Kohanim were the teachers of the people. They knew how to instruct a person to improve his ways and do teshuvah. Moreover, the Kohen entreated the Almighty on the sinner's behalf, in addition to the leper's praying for himself. If symptoms appeared which necessitated a week's quarantine, this was a sign that the offender was delaying teshuvah. Hashem caused him to be secluded for serious introspection. If his quarantine did not result in spiritual improvement, Hashem would cause him to be quarantined for a further week, giving him another opportunity to abandon his evil ways. If he did teshuvah, the signs of Tumah would disappear. If he chasi, Feshalom persisted in his sinful ways. The definite Tumah symptoms became noticeable and he was isolated. The leper's isolation laws. The Torah subjected a leper who was either temporarily, musgar, or definitely impure, muchlat, to special isolation laws. While the Jews were in the wilderness, he was expelled from the camp of the Shechinah, of the Leviim, and of the Bnai Yisrael, remaining outside them all. In Eretz Yisrael, he was banished from any walled city. The following laws applied to the isolated leper. Even if other people were expelled from the camp or city because they were ritually unclean, the leper was not allowed to stay together with them but had to remain isolated. A leper had to rend his garments just like a mourner. He had to let his hair grow wild. This too was a sign of mourning. He had to cover his lips. This was a punishment for having slandered others with his evil tongue. 63. Moreover, covering and veiling his head rendered him similar to one who mourns for a deceased. Upon encountering anyone, he had to proclaim, Tameh, Tameh, impure, impure, thereby warning the other to keep aloof. Moreover, his proclamation would alert others to his unfortunate plight, and consequently many people would entreat Hashem to heal him. All isolation laws applied even to the dignitaries of the people, and even to the king himself, should the plague befall him. After King David's sin with Bathsheba, the Almighty sent the prophet Nathan to rebuke him. Since David fully acknowledged his guilt, the Almighty spared him from death. Instead, he was stricken with leprosy for 6 months to expiate his sin. While suffering from Zara'at, David was isolated not only from society, but the Shekhinah left him too. He was most distressed about being separated from the Shekhinah and about being absent from the Sanhedrin. David implored Hashem to cleanse him of his guilt and heal him. In his great sorrow, he composed the immortal verses of Tehillim, chapter 51, in which he entreats the Almighty to grant him pardon. Hashiva li sason yishecha, restore to me the joy of your salvation. Tehillim 51-14. This refers to his longing for the restoration of the Shekhinah. His profound unhappiness was converted into rejoicing when he was again declared pure after 6 months, and could devote himself to his spiritual pursuits, Torah study in the company of Talmidai Chachamim, and Tefillah, while the Shekhinah resided with him. All the seemingly merciless laws imposed upon the leper emanate from divine compassion. The sinner, for his transgressions, should have forfeited Olam Haba. Instead, the Almighty decreed the stringent isolation laws upon him in the hope that they would induce him to take stock of his spiritual plight and do teshuvah. Thus he would not be lost for eternity. Moreover, banishment from society is equivalent to death. His great suffering thus expiated for his wrongdoing. Isolation also is a deserved measure-for-measure punishment for the laws of Zara'at. A. Lesson regarding the Almighty's individual providence. Liyov was a God-fearing man who lived in the land of Uz. Satan in heaven accused Liyov of worshipping the Almighty only amidst conditions of comfort and wealth. He was therefore granted permission to test Eov's righteousness. A succession of sudden tragedies befell Liyov. First, he lost all his money and possessions, then all his sons and daughters died. Finally, his entire body was covered with unbearably itchy sores, leaving him an acutely suffering and sick man. Liyov did not comprehend why he should suffer so, and in his heart began to doubt that the Almighty actually governs the world with individual providence. "You must mistake me for your enemy that you punish me so," he cried out to Hashem. There is a striking resemblance between the words Eov, which is my name, and Oyev, meaning enemy. Maybe you mistakenly consider me your enemy, and therefore plague me needlessly. The Almighty refuted Liyov's accusation with the same vigor with which Liyov had posed it, castigating him severely for casting the slightest shadow of doubt upon the justice of his ways. The following is part of the lecture by which he taught Liyov the exactitude of his providence. I will ask you, answer me. A person's head contains millions of hairs. I provided each single hair with an individual groove which moisturizes it. Would two hairs accidentally suck their nourishment from a joint groove, the human nerve system would be disturbed, and a person lose his eyesight. I separated each of the millions of minuscule follicles in the skin without fail, and yet you dare assume that my treating you harshly sprang from an error? Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Upon what are its foundations fastened? Who shut up the sea with doors, bidding it that its proud waves should go so far and no further? Have you comprehended the expanse of the earth? Declare if you know it all. Who made a course for the torrent of rain? The clouds in one Tazria, lesson from Zaraat moment, drop myriads of raindrops. Each drop emerges from its individual exit. Would two raindrops, by a miscalculation on my part, emanate from one mold, the resulting disharmony in the cosmic laws would cause a flood. I correctly compute for each of the countless drops of water its own exit, and you presume that I miscomputed your fate? Who created a course for the thunder? As each bolt of thunder leaves the sky, it pursues its individual course. Were two thunderbolts ever to meet, their explosion would shatter the universe into fragments. I calculate each thunderbolt's track, assigning its individual path, and you believe that I could have confused Eov and Oyav enemy, assigning suffering to you by mistake? Do you know the time when the wild goats of the rocks bring forth their young? There is a certain type of wild goat which is cruel. When it is about to give birth, it clambers upon a high rock to drop its newborn from it. I, however, provided an eagle to appear, spread its wings, catch the young, and return it to its mother. Were the eagle to arrive 1 second late or early, the young would perish. I compute the precise moment for the eagle to intercept the young, and you think that I misjudged you? Can you mark the time when the hind's calf? There is a kind of hind whose womb is narrow. It would not be able to give birth had I not previously prepared a snake which appears at the appropriate moment and bites its womb. Enlargement of the opening of the womb must take place at the exact fraction of a second, or else the young hind perishes. I never send the snake a moment early or late. How then do you presume that I did not distinguish between Eof and Oyav? Mistaking your character? The Creator explained to Eov that were he to err in the minutest detail in computing the laws of anatomy, chemistry, or biology, humans, animals, and the universe too would instantly disintegrate. Why then did Eov doubt that he supervises the occurrences shaping a man's life with equal precision? The laws of Zaraat too constitute a lesson concerning the exactitude of divine providence. According to the teachings of Torah, a person's future may hinge on the appearance of a hair on his body. If two white hairs were visible on a leper's body within the diseased area, he was declared tameh, impure, and hence was expelled from the circle of family and friends, confined to the lonely life of the excluded leper. How can the Torah subject someone's fate to the presence or absence of a hair? The explanation for the Zaraat laws is that there are no chance occurrences. Even the growth of a hair on a person's body may not be attributed to mere coincidence. Rather, the hair appeared or failed to appear as dictated by the divine will. If the person was deserving, Hashem caused the symptoms of tahara, purity, to appear. If not, the symptoms of tumya would develop on his body. The laws of Zaraat, then, teach us the lesson that we must regard every occurrence in life as brought about by divine providence. Yosef, the Egyptian viceroy, heaped accusations against Yaakov's sons when they arrived in Egypt. He called them spies, cast Shimon into jail, and demanded that they bring him their youngest brother. Yaakov's sons, the holy tribes, struck by a chain of misfortunes, did not attribute it to a technical mismanagement on their part. Rather, they searched for the true meaning of the events, blaming themselves. Truly, we are guilty, in Yosef's sale. Therefore has this distress come upon us in Parasha 42:21. And again later, when they were dismayed at finding the money restored to their bags, they acknowledged Hashem's hand and questioned, "What is this that God has done to us?" Carried a step further, the laws of Zaraat inspire us with bitachon, trust in Hashem. There was once a Kohen, an expert in examining Tzaraat, who was extremely poor. He therefore decided to leave Eretz Yisrael in lesson from Tzaraat, order to seek Parnasa in a different country. Before he left, he said to his wife, "Let me teach you the principles of examining Tzaraat, so that you can advise people who come to the house in my absence. You can tell whether someone is diseased or healthy by examining the grooves under his hair. Each hair is nurtured by its own groove. If you find that the groove under the hair has dried up, it is a symptom of disease, for the health or decay of each hair is dependent upon the moisture of its individual groove." The wife wondered at these words. If Hashem created a source of nourishment for each individual hair, she commented to her husband, he must all the more so have provided for you, a human being and head of a family who has to support sons. Don't leave Eretz Yisrael. Stay here, and your Creator will certainly provide for you here too. The Kohen listened to her and stayed in Eretz Yisrael, and Hashem helped him to find a livelihood there. Divine providence is attuned to the level of a person's bitachon. If a person believes that Hashem's bounty will reach him only via some labor performed by him, it is correct for him to engage in an occupation for a livelihood. Depending upon his level of trust, he will devote less time and energy to Parnasa and more to Torah study. On the highest level, a Talmid Chacham who devotes himself fully to spiritual pursuits and who is convinced that Hashem's bounty will provide for him even without his engaging in the physical effort of gaining a livelihood, would be wrong in taking off even a minimal amount of time from the superior occupation of Torah study for the sake of any other occupation. The Kohen mentioned in the Midrash was on a superior level of bitachon. His wife realized that his intended journey from Eretz Yisrael would lower his spiritual level. She therefore wisely challenged him, and once he strengthened himself in trust in Hashem, he actually provided his needs. Chovas Halavavos, in the 7th chapter of the Gate of Bitachon, lists 10 levels of trust, all of which are usually traversed by people in life. They are all incomplete except for the last and highest. 1. The suckling knows only the security and nourishment of his mother's breasts. 2. As the child's intelligence develops, his world is still centered around his mother, and he considers her the supreme source of strength and security. 3. The growing child begins to realize that the family, and his mother too, are dependent upon the father's support. He therefore shifts his trust and confidence to his father, admiring him as the ultimate source of power. 4. The adolescent becomes increasingly self-reliant. He often goes through a stage in which he believes that he is the master of his own fate, that his prosperity and success in life depend upon his chosen profession or business, and the industriousness and investment of time with which he pursues it. 5. Or if he does not work, he relies on other human beings, thinking that his support is dependent upon them. 6. Eventually, he realizes that there are areas in life which are beyond human control. For example, health and sickness, individual or national catastrophes, and so on. He will then set his bitachon in the Almighty in those matters, entreating him to be spared from evil. However, this bitachon is incomplete, and the prophet decried it, saying, Yirmiyahu 2:27, "In their time of trouble, they say, arise and save us." 7. A higher level of true recognition is a person's refusal to endanger himself for the sake of Parnasa, or engage in a trade that is injurious to his health, trusting that Hashem will provide for him even if he abstains from such occupations. 8. On a higher level yet, he does not believe at all in worldly causes, realizing that they cannot benefit or damage him. They neither provide him with Parnasa nor diminish it. Rather, all events are caused by Hashem alone. The reason for his engaging in a trade or profession is motivated only by respecting the Almighty's wish that a person not sit idly, but do some work. 9. As his knowledge deepens, he realizes clearly that one occupation does not give him Parnasa more than does a second, and that all the facets of his life, his financial position, his health, and so on, have been determined in the best possible manner by Hashem. He will Tazria, trust in Hashem, therefore constantly thank and bless Hashem for the tragedies as well as for good fortune, and will never desire that which is not his lot. 10. The ultimate recognition is a person's true evaluation of the fleeting nature of this world with all its occupations and the awareness of how great is the next world which will last forever. He will then take delight in thinking about and studying Hashem's greatness, occupying himself with Torah study, rather than exerting himself in worldly occupations, trusting in the Almighty to provide for him. This attitude makes a person a Ben Olam Haba. Thank you for joining this week's journey through the Midrash. If you enjoyed this story, don't keep it to yourself. Share this channel with someone. Please hit the like, share, and subscribe button for the next story. See you next week on the Midrash Says Out Loud.